Hello, this is the Wholesome Reader, continuing chapter 11 of Father to Nobody's Children, the Young Helpers League. Besides helping Bernardo identify weak spots in his organization, the hearing before the arbitration board had another positive effect. It put Dr. Bernardo's homes into the public eye. The board's conclusion that the homes were real and valuable charities and worthy of public confidence and support was worth more than any amount of advertising. Donations increased dramatically. The public saw Dr. Bernardo as a man who had been unfairly treated by his enemies, and they gave to his homes in record amounts. The money was put to good use, because as Bernardo's fame increased, more and more children showed up at his door. By the time the Board of Arbitration issued its decision, Bernardo was completing his first 11 years of ministry and had rescued 2,000 children from the streets. In the next 11 years, he would rescue over 12,000. But one problem overshadowed the ministry during the years following the Board of Arbitration's decision. The donations were not keeping up with the increasing number of children. During his second 11 years of ministry, Bernardo rescued 6 times as many children, but he had to do it with only about 4 times as much money. In spite of all that, Bernardo's vision never seemed to waver. He continued to dream big. His steps of faith were large ones, and often the committee formed to help him run the homes had trouble keeping in step. In 1881, for example, Bernardo publicly announced his plan to start a youth's labor house to help the many young men who were unable to find work and lodging. Lord Cairns, the committee president, was shocked when he heard about the plan. Without even informing his committee, the doctor planned to expand his ministry to include young adults. In a strongly worded letter, Lord Cairns threatened to resign if Bernardo insisted on going ahead with the plan. But Bernardo was apparently as persuasive as he was full of faith. The Youth's Labor House opened later that year, and Lord Cairns continued to serve as committee president. But as the years went by and the number of children continued to increase, Bernardo's slogan, "No destitute child ever refused admission," came into conflict with his conviction to owe no man anything. New buildings had to be built to house the increasing orphans, and some of the older buildings had to be renovated or replaced. After some soul-searching and much prayer, Bernardo decided that a mortgage on the buildings would not violate his convictions. Some of his friends criticized him for this decision. There were times when he probably questioned it himself. For example, on one occasion he found himself facing a mortgage payment of £500 during a time when donations were critically low. On the morning of the deadline for payment, he not only had no money, he even received another bill to pay. Bernardo was on his way to the office of the lawyer who held the mortgage to ask for more time when he was stopped by a British Army officer. "I beg your pardon, sir," the officer said, "but aren't you Dr. Bernardo?" The officer explained that he had just returned from India. His commanding officer had asked him to deliver a donation to the homes. The gift was enough to meet the mortgage payment, and the other bill as well. The growing cost of the orphanages made necessary some streamlining. The mission suspended some of the magazines it published and closed ministries that were not directly part of the work of the homes. But the cost-cutting was not enough. There had to be an increase in giving. Some of Bernardo's friends suggested that he could increase the donations if he avoided mentioning religion in his appeals, but this he refused to do. There had to be another way. On a cold November evening in 1891, after an unusually exhausting day, Bernardo sat down in front of the fire in his study. After brooding a while over the wretchedly poor boys and girls he had admitted that day, he fell asleep and began to dream. In his dream he found himself walking along the bank of a swiftly flowing river. Suddenly he heard a terrified cry for help. The boy was drowning in the river. Bernardo began to run along the bank in order to get ahead of the boy, who was rapidly being carried along by the current. Finally, he threw himself down on the bank and stretched out to catch the boy. But he couldn't catch him. Then Bernardo caught sight of some children playing nearby. He called to them to help, but didn't take the time to see if they heard him. He ran to another point and stretched himself out farther on the edge of the bank. The boy was coming nearer, but he still couldn't reach him. Just as he was beginning to give up hope, he heard a child's voice behind him. "We will hold you, sir. Don't be afraid." The playing children had heard his cries and were holding his feet so he didn't slip into the river. Now he could reach farther. As the drowning boy came by, he was just able to grab him, and the other children pulled him back onto the bank. The boy was safe. With a cry of joy, Bernardo awoke from his dream. In an instant, Bernardo realized the dream held the solution to his financial problem. I could not save the poor, helpless little waifs on the street by myself. I had not enough money. I had not enough strength. My arms were not long enough, he said when he described the dream to his contributors. But the children, the happy children safe on the bank, were going to hold me and lend me their strength and their courage and their readiness, and we would unite our efforts for the great rescue work. He had interpreted his dream to mean that the well-to-do children of England would help raise the funds needed to provide for his orphans. Within days, Bernardo created a new youth organization for that very purpose, the Young Helpers League. Members of the organization received a magazine that told, from a child's perspective, the great problem of homeless children and how donations from the Young Helpers League were helping to feed them and teach them a trade. Later, members of the league actually met the orphans they were helping in an annual event at Albert Hall, the largest meeting hall in London. The annual meeting included choral music, displays of over a dozen trades taught at the homes, military demonstrations by the boys in the Watts Naval Training Home, and even some humorous skits, all put on by the children. This way, the children that were members of the Young Helpers League were able to see with their own eyes how their pennies and shillings had been put to good use. Bernardo was hopeful that the Young Helpers League might teach children the habit of generosity and bring in a modest income to the homes. Perhaps, he thought, if the league caught on, it might actually grow to a few thousand members. But the actual growth of the league went far beyond all expectations. Within 10 years, over 25,000 children had joined the organization, and by the time Bernardo died in 1905, the pennies and shillings given by its members totaled £144,000. Years after Bernardo died, the league continued to contribute over £50,000 a year to the homes. The Young Helpers League did just as its name suggests. It helped. But it didn't solve Dr. Bernardo's money problems. The worrisome issue of ever-increasing expenses and not enough contributions continued to weigh heavily on him and may have even hastened his death. And that's the end of chapter 11.